So before Guy comes on stage, let me give a brief introduction, even though he doesn't really need it. So Guy's probably one of the most storied figures in Silicon Valley over at least the last 20 years. And I had the pleasure of meeting Guy 13 years ago when he came to London. I was working for a venture capital firm called 3i. And 3i at the time was the biggest VC on the planet. We had about 1,000 staff worldwide. And we're in a 13-story building. And Guy walks in and it's like, wow, who works on the rest of the floors? And it's like, well, this is all 3i. It's like, gee, I've seen the future of venture capital. Now, 3i is not in the venture capital business anymore, so that was a defining moment for me as well. But Guy probably is most famous in recent years for working with Garage Technology Ventures. And most of you may also know that Guy was the technology evangelist for Apple. So again, a personal connection with Steve Jobs. So with that, I'd like to introduce Guy Kawasaki. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Although arguably it's not a good morning because the passing of Steve Jobs has definitely left a large hole in the universe. And I worked for him from 1983 to 1987, and then from 1995 to 1997 I worked for Apple again, and just as he came back towards the end of 1997, so we overlapped again. So arguably I'm one of the few people in the world who've worked for Steve Jobs twice and survived. So I consider it an honor to have worked for him. He fundamentally changed my life. He changed the lives of many Apple employees. And he also changed the lives, I think, of many, many people in the computer business, in the phone business, in the tablet business, in many places, in the music business. So if you look at your agenda, I'm supposed to give a speech today about how to enchant people, how to be an enchanting person, to change people's hearts, minds, and actions. But because of Steve's death yesterday, this morning I wrote a completely new speech. And so you're not going to see what's on the agenda. I have a speech that's sort of dedicated to what I learned from Steve Jobs, and I think the lessons of Steve Jobs that you can apply to your startups, because fundamentally Steve was, arguably the world's greatest CEO, the world's greatest entrepreneur. I don't think anybody did any more for his customers or shareholders or employees than Steve Jobs. Truly, truly, no one has done more. So I have compiled the top 12 lessons that I learned and that I think all of you can apply to your companies. And so I have 12 key points. Usually I have 10, so there's a little bit of inflation in my speech. I use the top 10 format because in the last 2.5 decades I've seen so many high-tech executives speak. And I can tell you there are two key points about high-tech speakers, other than you, of course. The two key points are they suck and they go long. And that's a bad combination. If you suck and you're short, it's okay. And if you're good and you go long, it's okay. But if you suck and go long, it's like being stupid and arrogant. It's a bad combination. So these are my lessons that I learned from Steve Jobs. And I think that you can apply as entrepreneurs. So lesson number 1. Experts are clueless. If you start listening to these so-called experts, the A-listers, the journalists, the analysts, they cannot help you as entrepreneurs. They're going to tell you to do better sameness, to do what everybody else thinks is right. They're going to tell you what their concept is, often from a very arrogant point of view. Usually they're disconnected from customers. I cannot tell you, Steve Jobs did not listen to experts. Quite the contrary. Experts listened to him. And you could make the case that that's even more true today because of social media. That with Twitter and Facebook and Google+, you can get so much closer to people so much faster that to listen to the interpretation of experts and the pronouncements of experts is an absolute mistake. Pretty much, and I learned this from Steve, I watched him in action. Experts are clueless, especially people who declare themselves experts. If you meet someone who calls himself or herself a social media expert or guru, that's the person to avoid. Okay? As an entrepreneur, you're going to have to figure stuff out by yourself. Don't rely on others. So that's first thing. Second thing, pretty much customers cannot tell you what they need. If we had asked customers in 1983 what they needed, they would have said, I need a bigger, faster, cheaper Apple II. Or I need a bigger, faster, cheaper MS-DOS machine. No one would have said, give us a cute little graphics toy that was slow, that had no software, thanks to me, that couldn't use any of the industry standards, which had a little mouse instead of cursor keys, that had a graphical user interface with a trash can in the lower right-hand corner. No one could have described that. And so you can ask customers about how to evolve something that you've already shipped, how to make a revolution better, but I don't think you can ask a customer how to create a revolution, because customers are going to describe what they want in terms of better, cheaper, 10% improvement. If you truly want to change the world, if you truly want to be a great entrepreneur, you cannot listen to customers, honestly. I mean, you know, the day that you hear that Apple's using focus groups to decide on its future products, that's the day to short Apple stock. I'll tell you right now. Customers cannot tell you what they need. Second thing, the third thing is that quite to perhaps people's surprise, what I learned in the Macintosh division, working with those 100 or so other great people, was that we rose to the occasion. We did our best work in our careers because we were presented with the biggest challenge. And so rather than trying to break things down into bite-sized, small little things, I think you should give your employees and your co-founders magnificent challenges, just huge challenges, because that's truly why and how you get the best work out of people. If you ask an employee of Apple, why do they put up with some of, shall I say, the challenges of working at Apple? They will tell you that despite all the challenges, the reason why they work at Apple is because Apple enables you to do the best work of your career. And so if you provide your employees with this challenge, a big challenge, they will rise up and do the best work of their career. So big challenges is what you should present. Next thing I learned is that design counts. In a world where everybody's talking about price, lots of people care about design. Lots of people do. And this is something that's probably contrary to what most experts will tell you. Most experts will tell you there's a price point and people are price sensitive, and there's this curve of demand. And I think to a great degree Apple has disproved that. Design counts. There is an element of people, maybe it's only 10% of the people, but 10% of the people truly care about design. So you should care about design. Don't put out crap. I have tried to enchant people with great stuff, and I have tried to enchant people with crap. And let me tell you, it is a lot easier to enchant people with great stuff than crap. So, don't think of human interface and design as simply like a little layer on top of your great engineering algorithms. For what it is the product for most people. It's not the great algorithm. It's the skin of it. That's what counts. Design truly does count. Steve Jobs has proven that 5 times. Macintosh, iPhone, iPod, iPad. You could make the case that many other companies could have done what he did, starting with Xerox PARC. But let's face it, Steve understood, Steve had the vision, Steve had this ability to anticipate what customers need before they could articulate it. Design counts. Next thing I learned is that in your presentations, it's a very simple algorithm. Use big graphics and big font. It's probably contrary to most of your PowerPoint pitches. You're using 8, 10, or 12, right? And you're going to read your slide. And you're going to put up a competitive matrix. And there's going to be your column and your competitor's column. And guess what? Your column is going to be completely checked off, and your competitor's column is going to be full of holes. And that's going to be in an 8-point font, and no one can read it. Steve Jobs puts up slides that have one word. He has slides that, his minimum font size seems to be about 60 points. How many of you have slides with 60-point minimum font? Probably not many. Big graphics, big font. If you go look at the archives of Steve Jobs' keynotes. Big graphics, big font. 8-point font is out. Next thing I learned is that if you truly want to be an entrepreneur and innovator, you have to jump curves. You don't do things 10% better. You do things 10 times better. I'll give you some classic examples of curve jumping. First, we'll start with a historical one. There used to be an ice harvesting business. In the ice harvesting business in the 1900s, this meant that Bubba and Junior would go to a frozen lake or a frozen pond in the winter and cut blocks of ice. And in 1900, 9 million pounds of ice was harvested in the United States. 33 years later was the beginning of the ice factory curve. The ice factory curve now meant that you didn't have to be in the winter. You didn't have to live in a cold city. You could freeze water centrally any time of year, and then the ice man would deliver ice to your house. So imagine the advantage of going from ice harvester, cold city, cold time of year, to ice factory, any city, any time of year. Fast forward another 20 years, now we have the refrigerator curve. This is ice 3.0. Ice 3.0 meant that you had your personal ice factory. You didn't go to a centralized ice factory, or the centralized ice factory didn't deliver ice to you. You had your own ice factory. You had a PC, if you will, a personal chiller. And so if you look at this, the great values, the great innovation occurred because people went from one curve to the next curve. Actually, I said that incorrectly. Very few people went from ice harvester to ice factory to refrigerator curve. Most people, they were ice harvesters. They defined their business as ice harvesting. They died on it as the ice harvester. Then there were ice factory curves. People on the ice factory curves defined their business as we freeze water centrally and then we deliver it. Those people died as ice factories. They did not become refrigerator companies. And refrigerator companies are not looking at biotech. So one very important lesson is if you really want to change the world, you can't necessarily do it on the curve you're on. If you're on this particular curve and you try to do something 10% better, it's not good enough. If you were the best daisy wheel printer company, you said, next year we'll be really innovative. We'll introduce 3 more typefaces in 3 more font sizes. That's incremental. What truly is a curve jump is to go from daisy wheel printer to laser printer. If you were the best telegraph company, it's not to have better telegraphs, it's to be telephone company. Ice factories to refrigerator. Jump curves. It's not about 10% better, it's about 10 times better. The real innovation happens on the next curve, not on the curve you're on. Next thing I learned is that all that really matters is something works or it doesn't work. In other words, don't worship religions and fads. You know, at one point, Apple believed that a closed system would work. At one point, it believed an open system would work. Apple was never sort of stuck on whether we follow the open model or the closed model. All that mattered to Apple and Steve was it either worked or it didn't work, not that it was open or not open. A very good example with the iPhone. Many people don't remember this, but when the iPhone first came out, third-party apps were not permitted. The Apple story for a third-party app on the iPhone initially was Safari plugin. That was the answer. And the whole pitch was, with a phone, unlike a computer, which didn't make any sense to me at the time, with a phone, unlike a computer, a phone is a very complex thing. Lots of messages coming in, phone calls coming in on this constant data network. You don't really want to screw around with a phone and let third-party apps interfere with the quality of your phone experience. So we're locking out third-party apps. If you want to do anything as a third-party developer, it has to be through our browser as a Safari plugin. Okay? That was story number 1 with the iPhone. 6 months go by. Open up the iPhone, and they declare victory again. And they say, we're opening up the iPhone, we have had such demand and such interest in creating third-party apps, we realized that we need to do this for the benefit of our customers and the benefit of developers. It's now an open system. You can develop apps.